All right, welcome to season 3, episode 2 of The Unbroken Ground. I'm Paul. I am, as ever, your host, and this is titled season. So this is the second episode, season 3. So this one is Are We There Yet? I want to thank everyone for those that have been listening for a long time, or those maybe who just started. Thanks for listening. If you are able to recommend, share, all those type of things to spread to people who might be interested to hear the things I talk about, please do so. Again, if you have feedback, comments, you can find me on Facebook / The Unbroken Ground. You can send an email to theunbrokenground@gmail.com and on Instagram at The Unbroken Ground. All those places, you can hit me up there. We're going to be talking about walking, talking, surviving, experiencing the wilderness. So let's jump in. So I think that we give the Israelites a bad rap sometimes. So you think about the fact that they left a very stable situation, not a very good situation. You know, they are locked in slavery. They are being oppressed by rulers who are not moral or good, and so they're leaving a bad situation, but it is at least a stable situation. It's one they understand. It's one that they know kind of what's going to happen the day to day, the experience that is, and they are asked to do something completely new, to go someplace where so much is out of their control, so much is out of their ability to affect anything. They're wandering in a wilderness, a desert. They're already having to be kind of hunter gatherers, but they're this huge number of people, and there is no. If they lived in if they were walking through or traveling along the promised land, which seemed to be this land that flowed with milk and honey and had all this fruit just growing and just there for the taking, right? Then maybe they could support the numbers they had, but instead they were walking through desert and wilderness then and sparse provisions. And so they, I don't know if I'll say rightfully so, because there's obviously some big spiritual things that happened, that definitely should have clued them into maybe what some things that God had going on, and so that they could find faith in that. But I do think it's easy for us to scoff at the Israelites as we think about, oh, how dare they question God? How dare they complain to Moses that there's no food to eat? Like, where's their faith? Where's their trust in God? And the thing that I think is just so interesting in that is that, especially in our modern sensibilities, most of us don't, if we can avoid it. In fact, we tend to look down on people who don't avoid it, but most of us have groceries in our refrigerator to last us all week. Most of us don't have the idea that, well, I'm just getting enough food for today, and tomorrow I'll get enough food for that day, and because God's going to provide. Instead, we do things like we work jobs to be able to have a surplus, a supply built up, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But we, I think we feel like we set in judgment, I think, on the story of the Israelites. Yet the question would be is, are we as a society, as modern day Christians, how dependent upon God are we? How dependent, how much faith does it take excuse me, as far as how much faith does it take for us to live the lives we live, where most of the things we are like, I've got this, I've got it taken care of. And the first thing we reach for, in the American culture especially, is our wallet. Because we have the resources, we have the control, we have the thing that can fix this. And to imagine yourself to be in the shoes of like a tribal leader in Israel, walking through the desert, knowing that you have people who look to you for provision and depend upon you for sustenance. And if you don't eat, children are going to go hungry, and you have to come back to them and go, yeah, every morning this white dust is going to show up, and you can't collect extras of it because it'll spoil overnight, and you just have to trust that this supernatural thing that's happening is just going to continue to happen, and that's how we'll live. I mean, imagine, just imagine yourself doing that today, like just every day. No safety net, no plan, no. If God doesn't show up, then there's nothing we can do. No, we're putting it all on the line because we trust and we know this is where God is leading us and guiding us. Every day, people are looking at you, expecting you to feed them, because you're the leader of the family or whatever. And with the knowledge that if God doesn't produce this manna, then you're not going to eat, and people will go hungry. And I don't think we understand how hard that is. Like, looking back, we're able to be like, well, yeah, God provided. I mean, come on, right? Like, he provided. You guys, how did you guys not get that? But in what ways are you experiencing the same thing today? Like, what ways are you even allowing yourself the risk? Yeah, if God doesn't show up, then this isn't going to happen. I mean, we put safety nets in. We put buffers in. We trust in our bank accounts. We trust in our own brains. We trust in our own ambition. We trust in our own skills. And yet we look down. I think we look back, and for the most part, tragically, we look back at the Israelites and be like, what are you guys doing? Like, how easy it must have been for you guys to follow God. But I actually think how difficult it would be. No refrigerator, no, hey, we'll call a food delivery. No, we'll go to the grocery store. There's literally no, if God doesn't bring food, then this is just not happening. And I think the realities of that just continue to strike me with this, like, how does this relate? I've been reading through a Bible study off of the YouVersion Bible, and it's just it really is. It keys into about 5 different ways you can read the Bible and study the Bible and do like a quiet time or just a daily time to meet with God. And one of them is the what and the so what. And so it really, like, I want to recognize that, my first season 3, episode 1 really talked a lot about the idea that we're going to have trouble, and that we couldn't necessarily pinpoint whether that trouble was something that we had done, or if God was, doing something, or if some kind of mix of that, or if it's the result of somebody else's trouble. I mean, it's just so complex that we're not doing that. But and so the the next step of that, I think, is the so what, and I hope to maybe address that a little bit, and also just kind of admit that as I have been walking with Jesus over the last couple of years, it definitely has felt like a wilderness experience, and I think that the struggle is for me in a lot of ways is that there is there's a sense if you read scripture, if you follow the words of Jesus, there's a sense where Jesus is like, you will be blessed. The Bible, like the Psalms, I was just reading, I opened up the Bible Gateway on the computer, and it just is like, God will protect you and there'll be no harm that comes to you, right? Out of a Psalm. And it's like, okay, but then, I talked about this a little bit last week too, but then John the Baptist is in prison and he gets beheaded. I mean, that seems like a lot of harm. That seems like a whole lot of harm has come to John. And yet, based on how Jesus reacts to it, it's like that is the intention of how John was to live his life and to lose his life. That his ministry was going to cause him to be in conflict with the ruling party, and he was going to be bold and brave, and because he was bold and brave and he did that, then he lost his life. And then you go back to the Psalms and you're like, okay, what is all this about? How if the righteous man runs into it, you're this tower that protects you. There's no harm, or if you move forward, of course, John didn't have this, but we as Christians have it. You have like Paul writing things like, no weapon formed against you can prosper. You're more than a conqueror, is what he says. So there's definitely like a thread of, I think, that runs through Christianity. It's like, this is you're going to live a blessed life that's going to be so good. Like, you're going to be, and it'll be something that is easy to figure out. Like the closer you walk with Jesus, the easier it'll be to figure out what life is all about. And I think last week I just really expressed that, but I think I just want to bring it out again. Is like the closest people to Jesus had some of the worst lives. And worse is I guess maybe a debatable term there, but they went through some very difficult things. I love talking about the story of Paul and Silas. Paul gets a vision from God. Hey, Paul, come over here, come over to this place. And when he gets there, he's being followed around by this slave girl who keeps proclaiming the truth about them. These are the servants of God Almighty. Hear what they have to say. They're telling you the truth. And Paul eventually just gets sick of it, right? And he turns around and he's like, be gone, demon, right? Go away. So the owners of this slave girl lose their very profitable fortune-telling business that they had, and so they incite a riot, and Paul and Silas get beat. And at this point, I feel like there's some sensibilities here that I'd have some questions. God, you brought me here. Here I am. I'm proclaiming your good news. I just, we freed this girl from a demon, and now I'm being beaten half to death, almost to death, and then locked in chains to be basically judged in the morning or even executed. And I think the human response would be, what? Jesus, you brought me here. Is this why you brought me here? To be beaten, to be drugged through the streets, to be chained in prison for nothing, for saying, telling you your good truths. And those who know the end of the story would be quick to point out, but hold on, I think I want to hold into the tension of that, though. I get that there's a story in parts that ends with that where people get saved and God comes through and this crazy earthquake kind of story. But I mean, if you were to put that into like your life, like, oh yeah, I feel like God's telling me, or I'm trying to discern what God wants me to do, and then I go and do something, and suddenly there's this opposition, there's this, it doesn't work, or I'm struggling. We have a very real natural tendency of being like, well, then God must not have been wanting you to do that. And there is, I think, I call it a false belief, I call it a myth maybe, but there's an idea that we are always, if you stay connected with Jesus, then you will always be living this blessed, just kind of this life that can't be touched by all the difficult things. Charmed is kind of the way we describe this charmed life, where it seems like things just work out for you. And if you follow Jesus, if you get close to Jesus, then things will just continue to work out for you. And that flies in the face of so much of just even what the Bible says. And Jesus tells his followers, he said, you're going to have trouble in this world. Jesus looks at his disciples. He's about to go to the cross. He's about to die for all the world's sins. He looks at his disciples and he says, hey, you're going to have problems. You're going to have troubles. But be of good cheer. Why? Not because, hey, I'm dying so you don't have to go through struggles, so you don't have to go through the wilderness, so you don't have to walk through troubles. No, he says, you're going to have troubles. That's just going to be a part of life. But be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. I've overcome the world. And so I love, there's a particular author, Mark Buchanan is one of my favorites, and he writes about the fact that there's a spiritual rhythm to our lives, to our following Jesus, and that at some point, not an if, not a maybe, but at some point you will find yourself in what he calls the season of winter in your following of Jesus. And I think it's akin to, I feel like it's wandering in the wilderness. It's wandering in the wilderness. And I think that we find ourselves uncomfortable with that, because that's not the way that we sell Jesus. And I mean that in the best possible way, but we do try to find ways to get people to be like, hey, do you want to follow Jesus? He will fix your life, right? Like whatever life you have, he will make it better. And then it's hard because we don't follow up. Maybe we should with the fine print of like, but at some point, sometime during this, you're going to experience the wilderness. And I know this is true. It's true of my life. But I know it's true because Jesus wasn't spared for it. Before Jesus' public ministry, he goes 40 days into the wilderness. And it's, if you look at this, and this is not the only things you can pull from this, but he goes 40 days into the wilderness. He comes out without eating any food. He's at the limits of his human capabilities. And the question or what happens is that the devil comes to him and he's like, prove you're God. Like Jesus, prove it. If you really are God, you could just look at the stone and turn it into bread, which is true. We know that's true because he changes water into wine. It would have been easy for him to change the rocks into bread. But what's the point? Why is this a temptation? And the reason it's a temptation is because Jesus' powers weren't just some magical party tricks. He was never there to be like, oh, I'm hungry, I'm just make some food. He was there because he was living for God. And so Jesus experiences this wilderness where he had little. We skip past Paul's thoughts on this a little bit because we like to jump through and get to the end of this verse. But if you read Philippians 4:11 through 13, the last part is very famous. Like, it's for I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. But the first part of that, right? It says he's talking to his friends in Philippi, and he's just like, it's not that I was ever in need, for I've learned how to be content with whatever I have. And so he's actually saying there are times when I just didn't have enough. And at those times, I just didn't, having enough it was fine. I didn't need more. I found contentment. He says, I know, and this is the New Living Translation, but verse 12 says, I know how to live almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little. And of course, then the famous, for I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. But here's the interesting thing here. It would be hard to find, outside of maybe the disciples, Peter, John, James particularly, anyone who was closer to God than Paul. God spoke to him, blinded him, healed him of the blindness. He has this very connected relationship with God. And he lived his whole life following and doing what he felt like God was calling him to do. And yet he admits, he said, sometimes I didn't have any. Sometimes I didn't have abundance. Sometimes I had nothing, and I learned and I knew that I could make it through with even having nothing because Christ would strengthen me. And so there are seasons that we are going to walk through, and there are going to be, again, Mark Buchanan, The Spiritual Rhythms, you should definitely read that book. But there are seasons you're going to walk through. There's going to be spring and summertime and fall and winter is going to feel like the wilderness, wandering not in abundance, but in scarcity, not in this joyous victory necessarily, but sometimes in just a humble, patient dependence. And that's a hard one for us to celebrate, because it's much more attractive to be in the triumphant abundance, the summer, the harvest. But the Bible just keeps telling us and telling us and telling us, you will go through times of plenty and times where you don't have enough. And I think that one of the clearest examples of this is actually if you read through Proverbs. If you read through Proverbs, it's very clear that if you have a lot, or if you have things, you should be good stewards of them. You should set them away. You should store them. You should take care to continue, not just waste things, to be preparatory of times of scarcity. Like, that's in Proverbs. It's like, it's wise to do that. But there's this interesting, and I found it one day. The reason I found it, well, like all things, God brought it to me, I'm sure. But there was when I was in college, just after I graduated college, there was a guy who was Like you should read the Proverbs every day, one proverb a day every month. Because you could read that way. In a year, you could get through the Proverbs in 12 times, right? I will freely admit that I was never that good at keeping that commitment, but I did at least read through the Proverbs at least once. And there's this, if you go to Proverbs 30, you get to the end. So we're almost to the very end. So 30 is kind of this this discussion about whether or not you can have wisdom and but just it's kind of an ending point for Proverbs. And it starts with Proverbs 1. It's like, blessed is the man who follows in the path of the Lord because he has wisdom, and blessed is the man who fears the Lord because wisdom comes from that. And all throughout Proverbs is this wisdom about, making sure that you are preparing and that you're taking care of and that you're thinking about the plans, but realize that your plans don't really matter because it's only God's plans. And you get to 30, which is almost the end. 31 is actually the end, but the 31 is the famous the Proverbs woman, the diligent, the faithful woman. But 30 is the one before that, and this is what it says. This and I'm also going to tie this with something Jesus says too. So don't worry if you're getting lost because you're like, I don't like the Proverbs. But this is what it says. It says, chapter 30, verse 7 says this. It says, 2 things I ask of you and of God. 2 things I ask of God. Don't deny them to me before I die. And he says, 8 is, verse 8 is, keep falsehood and deceitful words far from me. And then he says this. He says, give me neither poverty nor wealth. Feed me with the food I need. And again, think about that. Here's this Proverbs. We've been talking about you can amass wealth if you have wisdom, and if you have wisdom, you'll fill your storehouses and you prepare. And then this guy comes along and he goes, don't make me wealthy. Which in our capitalistic society is like record scratch, like what? Don't make me wealthy. This is his prayer. He says, I only want 2 things from you, God. Here's the 2 things I ask from you, God. The first one is, help me to not lie. I don't want to lie. Keep false words from my mouth. And the second one is he says, don't make me wealthy. But he also says, don't make me live in poverty either. And so he says this. He says, feed me with the food I need. And then verse 9 says, otherwise, I might have too much and deny you, saying, who is the Lord? He says, if you give me enough to where I don't have to be dependent upon you, where I don't have to rest in your goodness, where I don't have to wait on you to act, where I don't have to just be dependent upon you, if you give me enough, if you give me so much, if you give me too much, I will forget you and I will say, who is the Lord? Or who needs the Lord? Look how good I have it. Look how good I'm doing. Look how I'm doing this. Oh, praise God. I'm blessed, but deep secretly I know that I know exactly where the streams of income is coming and where the resources are going to be, and I've got it all planned out. And in the way that I walk through my life, I can say, who is God? I don't need him. I have it all under control. And he says, so if you bless me that way, that's what I'll do. And that it's so easy for us to fall into that because we often like to be comfortable. We often like to be in control. And so here's this guy writing this proverb, hundreds, thousands of years ago, and he's like, don't give me too much, because I know in my heart I will say, who is the Lord? Who is that? Who is he? I've got this. And then he says in the other part, he says, or I might have nothing. So he says, the two sides of the coin, right? Like, don't give me too much, but don't give me too little, because if I have nothing and steal, then I'm breaking a 10 commandment. He says, I'm profaning the name of my God. He's like, give me enough, just enough, so that I don't become so convinced that I don't need God. But don't give me too little, because because at the end of the day, if I have to provide, if I have to figure things out, and it comes down to stealing or not stealing, whether or not I feed my family, he's like, I'm going to steal. So he's like, just give me enough. And what a strange, different prayer than what we might pray in America and capitalism and in our culture. I mean, you can hear them, right, in your head, the prayers that people pray. God bless me abundantly. God, give me all that I need. Give me the glorious riches. God, give me the things that I above and beyond, so I don't have to worry about paying my rent or my student loans or my grocery or medical bills. God, you own the cattle on 1,000 hills. You can bless me as your child. You can pour out all of that on me. And I mean, it's literally a million, maybe even close to $1 billion, but $1 million industry in Christianity, where one person gives advice about how to save money so you can not have to worry about it later in life. And his catchphrase is, live like no one else so that you can give like no one else later, right? But again, is that wrong? I'm not saying it is. That's something that you've got to work through yourself. But I think what you must realize is that you will walk through times of abundance, because God is so good and he does give abundantly and above and beyond even what we deserve. Always, he does do those things, and there will be times of scarcity. Paul knew that. Paul puts that in his letter. He's like, hey, sometimes I had enough and sometimes I didn't have enough. Sometimes I knew what it was like. But that's not what my following Jesus, my following God, my walking with God has nothing to do with the number on the bank account or the amount of resources that are coming in. That's not the secret, right? That's not the secret. And so there's this prayer of saying, God, just give me what I need for today. Have you ever thought about the time when the disciples asked Jesus to teach them how to pray? And Jesus teaches them the Lord's Prayer, what we call the Lord's Prayer, one that we often repeat and probably know very well. When Jesus is asked, teach me how to pray, he has this phrase in there that says, give us this day our daily bread. Give us this day our daily bread. And I think it actually, to me, points back to this proverb, because part of prayer is learning how to be dependent and how to walk with God. And so when we pray big prayers, God, I need all the things. Can you just move all of the obstacles out of the way? And sometimes he does. Sometimes he moves the mountains, I freely admit that. Sometimes you live in the season of life and season of following him where that happens. You pray and healing comes, provision comes. And sometimes you pray and it doesn't. Sometimes, if you're walking in the wilderness, it becomes much less a triumphant battle march, and it becomes a dependent journey, one day at a time, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. God, give me enough for today. Give me enough, just my daily bread. Because I trust that tomorrow when I wake up and I pray that again, you'll give me daily bread for that day too. And one day, it may be heaven, but you will also experience his abundance beyond all belief. But just know that if you haven't experienced, if you don't think you can experience, if you've insulated yourself so much that it's not really a question of physical wilderness, but there will be a spiritual wilderness that you'll walk through. And it won't be because you stopped reading your Bible, you would have some of those lapses because that happens. It won't be because you've suddenly lost faith or have forgotten how to follow Jesus. But instead, it's one of the ways that God shapes the inner parts of us is that he lets us go through the wilderness. He didn't keep Jesus from that. And if he didn't keep Jesus from that, why would he keep you from that? If he didn't keep Paul from that, why would he keep you? If he didn't, like Peter left everything to follow him, and yet he knew, like Jesus prays for him because he's like, you're gonna have it rough, buddy. How could I expect to not go through difficult times? Again, even just spiritually meaning that, like, hey, things aren't going that bad. And, I've got we got enough, but it can feel distant. It can feel absent. It can feel like I describe it. I like music a lot, so I describe it through a lot of songs, and I've talked about this one before, but it just fits so well. Is there's a song Rich Mullins wrote before he was in a car accident and passed away. Never really released into the mainstream, but it was called "Hard to Get," and it had these words. Do you really see me suffering down here? When it feels like you're just up there playing hard to get. And I think that's just an honest Christian prayer from a man who had gone through a wilderness, a desert, had not, and not even, and sometimes, like, you can drive God away, like you can make choices where you move far away from God, but there is just a season, like, again, if you haven't experienced, it's not an if, it's when you will feel like you're walking through the wilderness. And that's a great song. I also, there's a song, Andrew Peterson is actually the guy who wrote it first, called "The Silence of God." I actually heard it more, or kind of fell in love with it, through a band called Death Therapy. So if you like more of the hard rock, that's going to be your choice there. But if you like guitars and more along those lines, listen to it by Andrew Peterson. If not, check out Death Therapy. It's really deep. It's got a different dynamic to it. We'll just say that. So there's a chorus, we'll call it, in the song "The Silence of God," and it says, well, I'll read the part before it. man, I'll just read you the whole thing. I was going to read parts of it, but this is what it says. It's enough to drive a man crazy. It'll break a man's faith. It's enough to make him wonder if he's ever been sane. When he's bleeding for comfort from thy staff and thy rod, and the heaven's only answer is the silence of God. And it'll shake a man's timbers when he loses his heart, when he has to remember what broke him apart. This yoke may be easy, but this burden is not, when the crying fields are frozen by the silence of God. And this is the chorus part that I wanted you guys to, I often think through. It says, and it says, if a man has got to listen to the voices of the mob who are reeling in the throes of all the happiness that they've got, when they tell you all their troubles have been nailed up to that cross, then what about the times when even followers get lost? Because we all get lost sometimes. There's in the song by Death Therapy, there's actually the lead singer. They work with another band, and someone else comes in to sing kind of the I don't know if you call it a bridge. I'll call it a bridge, but it talks about there's a statue of Jesus on a monastery knoll in the hills of Kentucky, all quiet and cold, and he's kneeling in the garden, as silent as a stone. All his friends are sleeping, and he's weeping all alone. So Jesus spent time in the wilderness before he ever began his public ministry, but he also spent a night where he felt alone, where he was scared. He was so stressed that it said he's sweating, drops like blood. And so I think it's some comfort that if you find yourself in the wilderness, the difficult times, the times where it's hard to see the abundance of God, if you find yourself in the spiritual rhythm of winter, and what seemed so easy when you were younger and in the summer and in the spring, and it just came so easy, and now even though you have a deeper faith, you have a deeper walk, you're still just as hungry, seeking after God, and now it seems just a little bit harder. Know that Jesus had that same moment, a similar moment, where he felt that frustration. He had a moment where he just had to say to God, he just said, God, if there was some other way, if you could take this cup of suffering from me, if there's some other way, let it be. But instead, he said this. He says, but not my will, but yours. There's a question Jesus asked his followers. He says, who can be greater than his master? And the point he was making to his followers were, if the master suffers, should not the followers expect to suffer as well? If the master goes through distress, should not the followers expect to go through distress as well? The important thing, what's so important that I need you to hear, is that walking through the wilderness is not a loss of faith or a loss of belief or a brokenness in a relationship. It is a cycle. It is part. It is if anybody who takes faith seriously, they know it's a possibility, and they maybe even have experienced it. It's not as extreme usually as Job, but there is a reality where you have to realize that the things that you wanted, the things that you thought you knew, the things that you expected, the things that you had built your life on, suddenly don't make sense anymore, or don't work out the way you thought they would, or you said, God, you brought me here, right? Like Paul, like you brought me to this place, and now I'm in prison. I've been beaten. Like, God, what are we doing? Like, what is going on? And Paul got his answer pretty quickly. They were singing praises in the prison cell, and an earthquake came, and the jailer was going to kill himself. And Paul said, "Stop! We're all still here." And the jailer's like, "Tell me what it means to be saved." And he and his whole family had salvation. And so that's the hope, right? As you get to the end of a wilderness journey, that you find the promised land, that land, that milk of honey, that land of abundance, that you'll cycle back through that. And I do fully believe that you will, even if it is one day just in heaven. But it can be lonely and hard to walk through wilderness, because you can look at other people and just think, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my faith, or what did I do wrong, or why me, God? And I think, like Andrew Peterson has discovered, that sometimes when you ask that question, the answer that you get is silence. We like to say that one day it'll be revealed why all the things happened, right? There's always God's at work. So we'll always know why bad things happen. And sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we do figure out why life has to be the way it is, and then sometimes it never, to our feeble human minds, makes sense. So there is a so what? I want to finish off here. One of my longer podcasts. Maybe I'm gonna be longer this season. Who knows? With just me talking, just rambling on here. But the so what? So what? What is, like? What does this mean? What should I take from this? What if I just listened to 40 minutes of whatever this is? What does this mean? So here's the so what. The so what. The so what is this? Is that if you find yourself in a wilderness, in a valley, in a desert, and the shadow of the valley of death, or whatever you might call it, whatever you might find it, however you might find it, is that there are some survival tools. And I think that the most common one, there's two that I want to highlight. The first one is this, is to realize that you have not been abandoned. You are not alone. And that though you may feel abandoned or deserted, to know that it is not true. God is walking with you. You may not be able to see it. You may not be able to understand it. You may not be experiencing it in the ways that you think you will, but you just have to know He's there. He's walking with you. Because here's the deal. God is not a liar, and Jesus says this. He says, I will be with you always, even until the end of the age, even until this world ends. I will be with you. I will never leave nor forsake you. So if you're walking through this valley, this wilderness, and you feel alone, just know that you can't trust your heart on that. You can certainly exclaim that you feel alone. You can certainly explain that you feel alone. It's not saying you can't have that emotion, but what the emotion that you have doesn't necessarily make it a true reality. And so we have to know that you are not alone. God has not abandoned you. God has not forsaken you. His word says He won't, and so He won't. It can feel like He has. You can have a hard time seeing it. You can have a hard time finding Him. It can feel like He is left you. There's a psalm that's like, I've cried out to the Lord and he finally found me and lifted me out of the pit. So it's like you can feel like he left you in the pit and that one day he's going to lift you out of that. You can feel all those ways, but you have to deep down know that, but despite what your eyes might tell you, despite what your heart may tell you, he has not abandoned you. And the as part of that, this is knowing this is like part A, B, 1B. It's not the second point yet, but is to also know that this is just a season. It'll pass too. It may be long. It may feel like it takes forever. It may be until you die and you see him in heaven. It's a season. It'll pass. It's not your reality. It is not who you are, because who we are is in who Jesus is, and we are his. We are loved. We are abundance. Like, we are more than conquerors. We're all those things that Paul says we are. But when you walk through the wilderness, those can feel like putting on somebody else's clothes, like David and about to go fight Goliath, and Saul says, "Here, wear my armor," and David's like, "I can't. That doesn't fit for me. That doesn't work. That's not who I am." You can feel like that. I don't know, God, how I'm more than a conqueror. I feel so defeated. I feel so. I feel like I've tried everything and nothing works. I feel like I've been praying about this thing, whatever that thing is, and nothing changes. I feel like I've given it to you, God, and yet it still hurts. It still digs at my soul. I feel like I've walked, I seek you, God, and yet I can't find you. Know that that's not what defines you. You have not been forsaken. And the second part that I think is just found in the Lord's Prayer, which is and in Psalm 30, which is, I just need enough for today. So whatever that thing may be, I need to feel loved enough today. Just enough, God. Just help me to have enough faith for today. Just help me have enough faith to make it through, to wake up, to know that I'm dependent upon you, that I'm seeking you, that I'm calling out to you. I just need enough faith. I just need enough love. I just need enough hope for today. And tomorrow will take care of itself. Tomorrow we'll wake up and we'll do it all over again, and we'll put one foot in front of the other, and it'll be days that feel like a slog. But it's also days where you, like Paul says, he goes, I've learned. We gloss over this. And he says, I've learned. I know how to live on almost nothing. I know how to get by when all of life seems to not be working out. When all the things don't seem to be going my way. I know what that is. I know how to find contentment because I have Christ. Because it's his strength. And sometimes the truth is that sometimes is that we only find our dependence upon Jesus. We only can let go of our own control, our own self-reliance, our own dependence. We only can do that when we find ourselves in the wilderness. When we realize that, you know what, I can just ask for daily bread, and that's all I can't control anything else. I tried. And not nihilism, right? Like, nihilism is this idea of it doesn't matter what you do, just nothing will ever make a difference. The truth is that there may be, for the betterment of your spiritual health, to learn how to follow Jesus, to walk with Jesus, is you might need to go through the wilderness, and because then you let it go. You let everything go, and you learn to pray the Lord's Prayer again, where you say, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Honor to you, God, because you are the God who's in heaven, who knows the directions and who can direct the steps of my life. Hallowed be thy name. thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Because that's all we need. You say, whoa, 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 whoa. God, I want abundance. Like, where's the, I know that abundant life, like you make me lay down and green pastures, and you put me next to the streams. You make a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. But that, even in Psalm 23, there's a cycle. It says, even though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, it is you, God, who are with me. It's thy rod and thy staff who comforts me. God, if you walk through the wilderness, the prayer often is just to give me enough for today. And in that, there becomes a dependence. On a personal level, I can just say that for me, I felt like I've been walking through the wilderness for a couple of years now. And it's not that God hasn't blessed. He has. It's not that God hasn't done things that have filled my heart with joy. He has. It's not that he hasn't taken care of things again and again and again and then given me enough to get through the day. He has. But there's also just this sense of, it's almost like this sense of just, I'm trying to figure things out. And God's like, just today. And I'm like, yeah, God, but I need more. I want more. What am I doing? And it's not an easy place to be. But I find comfort in knowing that people of faith, the heroes of the faith, walked through that. One of my favorites will always be Elijah, and one of the things that's always just been a story that I just go to again and again and again and again is Elijah's battle with the prophets of Baal, and then he bailed. He calls down fire from heaven. His prayer, he says, God, and fire comes down from heaven. And then he's like, kill all the prophets of Baal. So they kill 400 prophets of Baal. And then he prays, it hasn't rained in like 3 years. And he goes and he's like, God, let it rain. And because of his prayer, it rains for the first time. And yet at the end of all that, the queen, Jezebel, is like, hey, Elijah, buddy, I'm going to kill you, right? Like, let's just know I'm going to kill you. And Elijah turns tail and runs. He runs out into the wilderness. Yeah, the wilderness, right? And he's like, God, I'm just ready to die. In no uncertain terms. I mean, he says that. He's like, I'm just so weary of life. I am just ready. And so God's like, have a snack, take a nap, and then you're going on a journey. And he walked and he got to the mountain of God. And the thing that just continues to give me hope and joy, the Spirit, all those things, is that God shows up not in some massive, like, oh, here's a thunderstorm, oh, here's this firestorm that goes by, but there's this quiet breeze, and Elijah suddenly is like, God's here. This quiet whisper, and Elijah's like, he covers his face because he's in the presence of God. And, I think I've been following Jesus for a long time now. And like Elijah, I can be over dramatic and complaining and lost the plot a little bit. But I'm comforted to know that it's in the still quiet moments that God comes to speak with us. And I love, again, this song, The Silence of God. I will kind of conclude with that thought, because the final lyrics talks about what's called the Man of Sorrows, which is the name for Jesus. It says, "And the Man of all sorrows, he never forgot what sorrow was carried by the hearts that he bought." So when the questions dissolve into the silence of God, the aching may remain, but the breaking does not. The aching may remain, but the breaking does not. In the holy, lonesome echo of the silence of God. The aching, the hurting, the questioning, the doubt, the confusion, those may not go, those may remain. But what we do know is that God is at work, even as we travel through the wilderness. And so that's my so what for you today. For me, is that day by day, moment by moment, God is at work. Even if I don't see it, even if I don't understand it, even if I don't see the next step, even if I can't see the next thing, even if I'm crying out and getting no answer, I know God is at work. Because his word says he is. He says that he is always working out for the good of those who love him. It may not be what I expect or wanted or thought I needed, but it will be enough. And as you walk through the wilderness, may you, like me, be reminded, I just need enough for today. Just enough hope, just enough love, just enough joy, just enough realization and trust and faith for today. And we'll figure out tomorrow when it comes. Thank you guys for listening, especially for this long one. As I said, back to doing this once a week, maybe, as long as brings me joy, and this does, getting to share with people out there who get to listen to this, and I hope that it brings you closer to Jesus. I hope that you have a blessed week, and hopefully we catch you again next week.